Hey, this is Vance, your fiscal ranger, and I'm here at the IT center, hidden somewhere in the Great Lake County area, and we're talking to Duane Weeks, and he's going to show us a new software system they got called Performance Matters. And I'm really excited about this because it is what is known as a dashboard, and it tracks data and then reports it in graphic methods like we're going to see, so that school teachers and principals and the administration can see how students are doing and take early action rather than waiting until the end of the semester when the final grades come in and say, oh, they did poorly. But now they're going to be able to react a lot sooner, which is what we were doing in corporations 25 years ago with systems like this on just running in Lotus 1, 2, 3 spreadsheets. So anyway, we're going to go through here, and Duane is going to show us this is a demonstration system. It does not contain or show real student data, and we'll see some of the things that it can do.
And I guess at this point you can see the screen fine.
And I'm going to zoom in on the screen. Duane,
Gotcha.
Why don't you tell us a little history of how we got this?
Yeah, so Performance Matters is an application that whenever we first got here in June, we were looking at some existing
Last
data.
year, 2017?
Last year, yeah, 2017, yeah.
Okay.
We were looking at some existing systems and talking with stakeholders. One of the needs that came up pretty quickly is that they really wanted to be able to get data that drilled down all the way to the classroom level quickly. And so we took a look, an inventory of the existing systems that were here, and we thought there would be a great opportunity to bring in something like Performance Matters. Performance Matters is a little bit of a, I don't want to say like a state standard, but I think it's in 47 districts.
Oh, good. So it's like widely used. We're not the pilot.
Exactly.
It's not like a Bill Gates grant, but it's going to run out and we're not going to have it anymore.
Yeah, I think it's a great product, but we weren't first in space in this particular case. And so that also allowed us to, once it was purchased, late August, our teams, our integration teams that push data around other systems are extremely gifted, like probably the most gifted group of folks I've worked with. And so we were able to produce the files to Performance Matters the day the contract was signed. And there are 42 files, so it's a pretty extensive amount of data, as you'll see here in a little bit, that gets pushed over. And it was kind of a neat problem to have because we were waiting on the vendor to process the files, not to get the data out. And what we started from there is we started demonstrating it in mid-October to principals, and then from there we unleashed what the training pattern would be, which was us training district leadership and school leadership in October and November, and then we took the roadshow to the schools in December and January, and now even February, where we train faculties in it. So we're actually taking the training directly to the teachers, and for the most part, the product's been pretty well received.
Good. Okay, what I'm going to do is zoom in on just the screen.
Sure.
And then I'll join you at the table, and we'll go through a run through of the system.
Yeah, sounds good. So basically, when either a school leader or a teacher or whoever logs in, they may see different things. Everything is based on permissions, and so what we're going to look at is we're going to look at it from a leadership standpoint at first, and then we'll look at it from a teacher standpoint.
Okay.
And so right now, because the permissions are right-sized, right now.
Why don't you explain what permissions mean?
Sure. So basically, one of the parts of the project that was extremely important is we imported thousands of users to be able to get access to the system. The system is accessed through single sign-on, so it actually comes through our portal, so it's nice and tied in. So
getting caught up with the 90s.
Exactly, right? So, that part was pretty cool. And that was done pretty rapidly. But part of the other thing that we did is that every night when the data comes over, it comes over from an HR record, which is a good gospel word to a large extent.
Yeah.
And so if you're a principal, you come over as a principal and you have principal permissions and Performance Matters. If you're a teacher and you have scheduled classes, then you come over as a teacher.
So that means that they're limited to just what they're responsible for. They're not looking at other teachers' data or teachers, are limited to just what they should be allowed to look at, and you don't have wide access, so people don't have to worry about, somebody in another school looking at their kids' data that sort of thing.
Correct. That was the main idea, and also to it is important because it is a repository for student data to get those permissions right-sized. Every once in a while, we have to nip and tuck. You have teachers that are in kind of leadership roles that may be assisting with wider initiatives or so, and so we give them school-based. But all that is dictated by administrators. It's kind of the same process that we would give with Skyward or anything else. It's basically requested by an administrator, and there's an approval chain and everything.
Okay.
But with that said, right now, when you come in as a district leader or a school leader, the first thing you will see is the dashboard. The dashboard is designed just to give you a quick glance of what's going on. So the first option here to the left is where you can actually go in and you can search students if you would like. And basically, this is just a search screen where you could, like if I was, I don't know, like a principal and I wanted to look up one specific student, I could just start typing in the student's name. And when you start typing in the student's name, then what will happen is that all this data will be hashed out, like I said, just to protect the identity.
Sure.
And make sure the data is confidential. But what you would see is that it starts searching for the first and last name, and so you can start typing combinations, and you basically just pick a student. And we'll look at the student detail.
So like if a parent complains and they go complain to a board member and, or to the superintendent directly, then they can look this up because they have the access to the data. And find out, some background before they give any answers, as opposed to just being put in a corner and not knowing anything about the student.
Sure, and I think that's true, especially of principals as well, because if you're a principal of a large high school like a Lake Mineola or so, you'd like to get to know every kid, and Linda might have, but this gives you a chance to do that quick lookup. The other part that I think is kind of neat is we just kind of work from top to bottom, left to right or so, is that it gives a snapshot. We send attendance data over every night. So because attendance data is building throughout the day, and because we're trying to keep the data synchronization to be relatively orderly, about midnight to 1 o'clock or so, that data syncs over. So there's always a slight day behind, but this is basically...
So they have up to 15% absentee rates?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that you have to look at, and of course on 3.7 I'd have to take a look and see what's going on there, because that spike seems a little abnormal to me. So
yeah, I thought maybe that was that walkout day, but that's
not that was yesterday. Yeah, that was yesterday, and actually they weren't counted absent for that day. So I'd have to look and see what's going on there. That may be an anomaly. But with that said, generally as a rule, what it's doing is it's showing you your trends. Now, this is the district as an aggregate, too, so I think that's another important thing to note.
But it could be on field trips, or I don't know whether they're counted anyway.
Correct.
But the key is that it gives the leadership the data now so they can ask the questions.
So I think that's
about what's happening, why, and whatever the reason is, they take action as opposed to getting data later that goes to the state and it shows up that we got a 20% absentee rate or something like that. I think they don't know the reason why.
I think that's very true. And I think it too also allows you to, as the data has become more transparent, then we're going back and actually addressing and maybe some of the data entry type things. So for example, like one of the things I'll do, because that's got my curiosity piqued, is I'll go back to our integrations team, see what it is, and that may flatten down. But because the data is so easily and readily available, we now have people asking more questions about the data. And so that kind of takes two paths. One is, well, the data's there, and so let's talk about what we're going to do to correct it. And then, of course, the other one is that, hey, maybe there's some data cleanup that needs to go on. So I think overall it's been kind of a purifying...
quality control over the data.
Exactly. But what is neat about this is, from a programmatic standpoint, is you'll see the different grades listed here, since this is a district view.
The camera may not be able to say that, but each of those little dots is a different grade, and so then the lines up there would show you different grades.
Correct. And what you can do is you can even isolate.
9th grade seems to be out of. They're taking off.
Yeah, they seem to be. Somebody seemed to have. If it was 12th graders on 3.7,
6th grade were pretty good.
If it was 12th graders on a day like that, I'd be like senior skip day. But something's going on there. We'll look at it. But what you can see is that when I actually highlight it, it isolates the grade. And then if I hover around this dot, then what should happen is that I should get this.
See, that's what corporations have had for years, and kind of the government to finally catch up with us is great.
Visual analytics, and so So this gives me a chance to say, hey, this is exactly what's going on here, and it lets me know what the rate is, what the count of students, and this is calculating daily absences on the screen at least. There's other demographic information that's just available in a snapshot, the male to female percentages, the other attributes as far as ethnicity goes, ELL students, migrant students, ESC students. So again, if I'm a principal, I'm just seeing my school, but this is the entire district because I've got that district permission set up. And then over here, something else that I think is extremely valuable is that you're able to take a look month by month at discipline counts. And I think this is...
Ninth grade again is...
that I have more of an explanation for. Anybody who's been a ninth grader or...
March seems pretty good.
Yeah, March seems pretty good. I mean, so far so good. Right now, remember, we're only halfway through
See,
it.
these are for by month.
It's
so
true.
I'm pointing out because the camera can see what I'm pointing at.
Yeah, and so what's neat about that is that again I can kind of sort of go through and look at 12th grade,
And you look at by grade.
and I think it allows you to spot trends because yeah, there are certain grades that probably have spikes, maybe around spring or things.
Pre-K pretty good. They're really they actually show up.
Pre-K is not bad. Now, somebody in pre-K may be causing a little bit of trouble, but yes, for the most part, it looks like it's doing pretty good. But it does give you the opportunity as a school leader or a district leader to monitor it as it's building, and that discipline data is coming over every night. So you're getting
And what kind of, when you say incidents, what are examples of incidents that?
It can range from anything. It's basically, the state has like an incident coding that you have to do when you report to the state. So it can be something like a tardiness. It can go up to like arson or much more unfortunate things to some extent. So it's basically any recording of that incident, that code at this point. And
I'm sure you can drill down into type of incidents?
At this point, that's one of the things we're working with Performance Matters on is that in kind of sort of version 1.01 at this particular point you can't, but it's something that we've worked on them, or working with them to try to see if it's a possibility in the future because that data would be...
I'm going to widen the lens a little bit.
Sure.
Here.
And this screen here too, like I said, is sort of more or less designed as a quick hit, just like let's see what's going on. Down here, I'll come back to this. This is the dream, but we're in the process of implementing this part of the dream, which is
test analysis.
Yes,
they can't see that, so I'll explain what these are we're looking at.
And we'll take a look at a demonstration site. This is for our local assessments in a way to actually be able to quickly give teachers useful information on those local assessments to do something with, instead of having to drill down and drill 6 different ways and be almost a statistician to maybe figure out what do I need to do to shape instruction.
Right.
It's a very, very, very teacher-friendly view of, hey, look, I have my class. They're struggling a little bit with this standard, so let's go back to the standard and maybe reteach it or something like that. But hey, look, over here, they're succeeding. Let's spend time on the things that need work.
An assessment is the code word for test. Right?
It is, and the good news for it is that it gives me, like, as a teacher, I would have loved to have had this. It gives me the ability to construct a test pretty easily and have those robust analytics should I want it. It's not necessarily ever going to be a requirement.
It's kind of like running a marketing program of coupons and different coupons and see which one works.
Yeah, exactly. And it gives you a chance. But we'll take a look at the demo site because this is the part that's in development right now. It's going to be implemented in 1819. So a couple of other things as I'm kind of going through these tabs here. There's a news and assignments.
We were in school overview, and now we're going to news and assignments.
And news and assignments isn't really anything that we'll probably use at this particular point. It's just basically like a quick online bulletin board to say, hey, this is going on. However, if it follows the pattern that I've seen in other districts, like we will get FSA scores in over the summer, and people will become extremely interested in seeing how their class did. Understandably, and so you might pop a quick announcement like, "Hey, FSA scores are in." Or
FSA is the Florida
Standards Assessment. Correct.
Okay, so how often is that done?
That's done. Well,
I know they get so many different tests.
Yeah.
May not be able to keep track.
Bit of a trick question because somebody was like, "Hey, can you try to do something?"
But essentially, it's what the state posts,
exactly.
So they'll get better details here.
So
they can drill down easily.
They'll get notifications that the tests are available.
Okay,
so that the data is available. So really, this is not the most exciting part. Shared reports I like. We're in the process of building a lot of them. Most of them are in development at this point. But shared reports is the ability for, instead of, if we want teachers to get data, you don't want them to have to go through 32 steps to get the data.
Yeah.
And what this allows us to do is this allows us to build a report to spec and then push it out to the teachers.
Yeah.
And
kind of like in spreadsheets, you have a template, and so you share the template.
exactly.
Okay.
The advantage of this is that in a spreadsheet or anything you would print out or so, or save down,
Yeah.
the data is kind of dead because you might have got a kid in yesterday.
Yeah.
When every time a teacher runs these reports,
It's current
it's
data.
current data based
Yeah.
on their enrollment right now. And so this is always like, you get 2 kids in today, you lost a kid yesterday. This is always keeping up with
And
those
by
transactions.
lost, you mean they were transferred out.
Right, yeah, in a good way.
I normally don't try and lose kids.
Fair point. But this is where those shared reports will live. The school view is something that a district has, and so these are different schools. And so for a second, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the view that a principal would have, which is, this is a quick snapshot, and these names.
These are fake names.
These are actually the teachers. It doesn't scramble the teacher's name, it just scrambles the student's name.
All right.
But, I mean, everybody, you can look at on staff.
Well, it's too small for the camera to
Yeah, I was going to say, you can, well, and all this stuff's on a web
So
page anyway.
where each of these is a teacher in a section, and then these are, you're going to explain what these different codes are?
So one thing that's kind of good is that, to me, the way the philosophy of performance matters is start with kind of sort of generalized data and then let us sort of punch down to where we can see more. And it's designed to kind of sort of, like you said, kind of like start the process of, let me ask a question to why this is. So for example, what this is basically doing very quickly is this is just giving you a rough demographic breakdown of your students. And so what it's doing here is that it's going through and it's saying, all your students, I teach 103 kids. And then it just labels...
Not in one class.
Not one class, combined schedules. I picked
It's got rules about
exactly. Well, we'll see how we can actually filter out from class to class.
Okay.
But this is a middle school. This happens to be a middle school that we went to. So during the day, they're teaching 103 kids.
All right.
And out of those 103 kids, you have that little purple pill, and that'll tell you, like, okay, these are ESE students, ELL students, 504 students.
ESE is English?
I'm sorry, exceptional student education.
Okay.
These are your special ed students.
And then ELL is earning
English language learners.
The EWS is...
Early warning system, we're going to talk about how sensitive that is at this point, but I'm also going to tell you there's another report that we built out that kind of makes it a little less sensitive. You may have seen some of that board conversation.
So it's like maybe students that need extra tutorials or...
It could be that. It could be students that are experiencing an issue in one of kind of sort of 3 areas. One is attendance. So if they've hit certain attendance thresholds, it may flag them as an EWS student. Discipline, or potentially academics. And it's so sensitive at this point, which is kind of a good thing, but it's part of the open conversation. Actually looking at the grade book. So it's actually looking at last night's grades in the grade book and going, does this kid have a D or an F right now? So 504 is, 504 plan. And so a principal can click in one of these, or what we could do is that we could click on one of these. And so right now, the view you're seeing is the view that a teacher would normally see. Now, of course, be a little more meaningful if you actually saw names here, but because we hashed it out because of the demo, you kind of get the idea. And what this does is that this allows me to do a couple of different things. Now, this particular teacher had 100-some students because they were teaching middle school, so during the day they have contact with 100 students. But one of the first things I can do is I can isolate a particular course or combination of courses. So if I wanted to look at my first period class, I just clicked on that, it resorted real quick.
Okay, now it shows 19, that's what
Correct.
In other words, just the class we're looking at as opposed to the total class load of the teacher.
Exactly,
Okay.
so if with one click I can isolate it. Or you know what, I might say, I want to look at all my Earth, because it looks like he's got some advanced classes here. I just want to look at all my Earth, Space, Science classes as
one. So you can select more than one.
Exactly, and so I can look at them as a group.
I mean, I worked with databases back in the military. And I was like,
I know, exactly.
graphic analysis.
Exactly, it's pretty cool. And so there's other things I can do, which is that right now I'm displaying all students. But if I just wanted to look at the ESE or the students with disabilities population, if I click on that, then it resorted and now I see those 16 students that have that status. And then if I also wanted to look and see if there's any combination, in this particular case there is, of ESE students and ELL students, then I can see that as well. And then of course unchecking it releases the filter. So pretty quick way. If I wanted to go, okay, that's great, but I was really talking about this student, I could click there, and then would isolate that student. And then with a backspace, I could go ahead and release the filter again. So anyway, pretty easy to. The good news is the training for teachers usually takes about.
And then I'm
30 to 45
guessing
minutes.
that you would, when you get these data populated, you'd be able to drill down with each of these?
Correct. And so what's neat about that is that once I've isolated the student or the students that I'm looking for, I can click on one of these, and when I click on one of these, what will happen is that I get this new screen. Now, this screen has a lot of different purposes, and to be honest with you, one of the things I've seen some schools do is they'll put a piece of paper over the door so people can't look in, but they'll also, in a conference room or so, have a projector or display, and they will actually pull this up, because what I've heard it called affectionately sometimes is the parent conference screen, because whenever you're in a parent conference, it's kind of got a standard process. Like we're all introducing ourselves. I'm young Duane's English teacher. I'm young Duane's math teacher, so on and so forth. And
then we'll have to spend time printing out stuff and having a file folder and everything.
And the parent gets 42.
So they can walk the parent through real data.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so the first thing over here to the left would be something along the lines of the schedule. And so that's, that comes up in a conference, like I said, as we're all introducing ourselves. But then it turns to other concerns like attendance. And so what it does for the year is that in one stop, it also says, okay, attendance. So attendance is not an issue in this particular case.
Now, will parents have some sort of access to a view of this
So
that theoretically could ask them to track it from home?
Yeah, it would be a potential possibility of performance matters. There's also potentially ways that could be explored maybe in Skyward, because Skyward has a parent portal.
Okay.
And so you would go to Skyward for that as well, but I believe a lot of that functionality at some point could be available.
So maybe a lot of this is already available in Skyward?
Correct. I think this is more along the lines of how do we pull it up quick and get it in their hands, because, parent portal adoption is always tricky. It's a little bit of a eternal war. You're always trying to get parents into that parent portal, because ultimately if they are monitoring the grades in Skyward, then it's a much more productive event. And then if they come here and
thing down here that tracks the number of times that the parent actually accessed it, and you can start issuing them a grade.
It does have an audit log, but no, they haven't done. They do school grades. They do school grades. They do kid grades. They don't do parent grades.
I just read Portugal is now holding parents accountable.
I mean, it's a theory to some extent. So I mean, that's pretty interesting.
Parents, you better start looking at the data.
And so the next concern that may come up is that discipline. And so it'll list the discipline. So really, if you think about what we're discussing with the parent, these are essential ingredients into student success. Attendance, being there, has an impact. Staying out of trouble has an impact. And then also, one of the other things that it starts to do is these early warning indicators, it starts to go ahead and give. Now, remember, this view would be available to teachers. So if a teacher sees...
That's early warning indicators, like behavior by incident, course failures, and so forth.
Correct. And so what this is doing is, this is saying, hey, in this particular case for quarter 3, and this looks like a recent event, whoever this anonymous student is, this looks like this has all happened in the 3rd quarter. So again, this is great information for a teacher to know.
This is discipline type, like disrespect, inappropriate, abusive language.
Which I would have never used as a middle school student, but...
Probably used the wrong baseball team failure.
Something like that, right? Yeah. And so what is interesting about this is that this is, if I was a teacher, and just dissecting this for a second, it would say, hey, listen, this kid has not been in trouble a lot, but 3rd quarter is hit. Let's see what's going on. So there may be, that gives me information to start taking action on, right? Yeah. It's saying that all of this is recent. Or it might have said, hey, it happened in the 1st quarter, but you know what? It's evened out since then, so that's good. Course failures, we'll take a look at. This HST, in case you're wondering what that is, those are high-stakes testing course failures. And not that you want any student to fail a course. However, you are watching if in this particular case if they're failing civics or language arts or a math course or something that's associated with a high-stakes test.
High stakes means what?
Like basically, are they going to take an FSA test at the end of the year? So, so from a school or teacher standpoint,
so there are certain ones that lead to performance on higher priority tests, and that's you're tracking that first.
Separately, kind of.
Okay, so you're tracking to the tests, though, but at least you're making sure that the kid gets counseling or whatever if they're starting to fall behind.
True.
In important tests that may affect their grades.
Will affect the grade, will affect potentially the evaluation because of the way Florida does evaluations, the evaluation of the teacher. And don't get me wrong, like if I'm an art teacher, I don't want you failing my class either. But because we do track course failures, but we just sort of separate the high stakes testing ones just to see if there's other things that need to go on. And then down here, what you would see is that you would see in this particular case, well, what you would see is that you would see basically the grades for term 1, quarter 2, semester 1. And then term 3, like I said, is actually going in to the grade book on the nightly basis, the online grade book, and pulling those grades out. And so in this particular case, this gives me almost real-time data to go, hey, there's an issue right here, potentially, let's start working on resolving.
Is there a graphic version of this that would show the downward or upward trend?
They haven't done a visual, I mean, that's a good enhancement request for us to ask the company for, but they haven't done like a visual, they haven't done like a visual analytic of that. However, one of the things the MTSS team, that intervention group, is working on is they're working on doing that process in here. That's something that's actually been purchased and going to be launching in 19.
But another way of doing it, having come from the corporate world where you did that, was you would have some sort of a score there that would show maybe the percentage going up or down, and then be maybe a particular color, which means good, versus one red, which is bad.
Sure.
And that means you can trigger faster and look at things to react to.
Sure, and what's fascinating about that is that on the MTSS module, they've actually built something like that for students that are intervention. So they actually, and it's kind of neat, like in the MTSS module, they have to where you can set a goal, so you can, like in a conference with the student, go, we're going to set a goal of 80. And so it's got like a line here, which is the goal line, and then of course you're bouncing on the trend line.
It's called profit margin in business.
Yeah, something like that, right? So I think the neat thing about that is that Performance Matters has that functionality in a different module, so that would be something that I might ask them about at some point. They've been pretty receptive to some of our changes, but then they are a nationwide product, so they kind of do that. But this is kind of sort of that introductory screen to go, here's what's going on with that. One thing that is also neat is that on test results under local...
This is test results. We're back at that. Okay.
And under local, there's nothing here yet, but we will start building the LSA, so the teacher would be able to see like the LSA or any of that other data right here.
LSA is?
The Lake Standards Assessment, which is basically... the state generally requires like progress monitoring to go on throughout the year, so a lot of districts have had to come up with local assessments to address that issue. And so the thought here is that if we were going to have local assessments, like let's put all this stuff in one place where it's really easy with a couple of clicks the teacher can get a hold of the data and actually do something with it. Right now, that data is living in another system. That was one of the gaps that we kind of identified when we first came in, or when I first came in June, is if I'm a teacher, I go over here for grades, discipline and attendance, and then I have to go over here to look at some assessment data, and then even some other assessments were in a third system, and that's really kind of a heavy lift on the teacher to have to be in 3 systems and pull all that data together. So our thought is that if we could house or warehouse all this data together, a teacher would be able to go in and like look at that. Yeah, that's theme music.
They found me. It's okay, I'll just turn it off.
I'm impressed you get reception in here. I never get anything.
Like, especially when it's a call from Michigan. Okay.
Where it's probably considerably colder. maybe not in this room. So, but with that said, next year the local assessments will go in there. So right now there's nothing in there because we haven't actually been taking. One thing to note about Performance Matters might be of interest. Part of the efficiency we're trying to get to with a unified system too is to kind of help try to consolidate the cost. And I'm not even just talking about the cost of the system. There's a lot of man or woman power that goes into having to integrate all these systems and tie all this data together. And then a lot of work hours.
And then every time there's a revision in one, you have to validate that the data is still accurate going to the other data.
Well, and even from our teachers, like, or our principal standpoint, that's a great point. And when you're trying to pull all this data together to paint a picture of what's going on and how you want to influence instruction with this data, if I have to pull from 5 sources, then I'm doing it in pivot tables and Excel, and that's extremely extremely
Labor
time.
intensive.
It is. So it's not just the money in the systems; it's trying to save money on the labor part.
Yeah.
So, but with that said, the state assessments are in here. And so what this allows is that we've imported up to 5 years of assessment data in this particular
That's
report.
ELA and that's math.
Correct.
Okay.
If we looked at a high school, it would be a little more dramatic because they'd have more years built in. Or this student may have transferred in a couple of years ago. But what teachers have really loved is that this gives me kind of sort of like a color coding system to see where the student is on the state performance measures. And by clicking on this little plus button...
This is on one student.
One student, correct. Because I've sort of drilled down into
Right.
one student. But now if I have a question what the student is doing, what it's allowing me to do is that it's allowing me to go into subparts of the
It
test.
has categories like key ideas and details, language and editing, text-based writing.
Correct.
So it's different skills.
Exactly. And so what I can do is I can go in there and I can see very quickly, like, oh, well look, this student here is struggling, so let me go ahead and see.
What,
if
red
I can help.
means struggling and
It does.
yellow?
It's basically a red, yellow, and green, and so what it's doing is that it's letting you know the percentage of items that that student answered correctly on that test.
Okay.
And so if I see red and yellow, and so again, I could take, I mean, you could, data is, it's a very interpretive art to some extent, but I can see clear-cut issues that I might want to address, like, which is in this particular case in language and editing, I saw it decline considerably from one year to the next. So maybe I start working with that student in an attempt to figure out why. And later on, we'll take a look at some aggregate reports that we can pull. And maybe what I do is that because even drilling down, I mean, teachers are human beings, right? And there's only so many hours in the day.
Right.
You might want to take your first stab at looking at class-wide trends and then kind of sort of drill down to the student in an attempt to resolve, some of the wider issues you may see in your class. One thing of note is that none of the teachers have produced this data as of yet. This is all data from the previous year. So one thing that is a little tricky to remember in Performance Matters is it's this year's students, students that are in front of you now, with last year or previous year's data. Now, as we're in year 0 of Performance Matters, when we get to year 1, we will have built an archive site, so teachers will be able to go back and look at last year's students with the test they took and kind of see how they did, if you get what I'm saying. So,
Is there any plan or steps to actually at certain, I'd say some grade point level, have the student maybe be able to track their own data and be self-reliant?
Yeah.
Not all of them will do it, but there may be some that then can say, oh, I better start reading that and start holding them accountable.
So that's a great question, and to be honest with you, that's a question we've asked Performance Matters. And let me tell you why. There's a pretty decent movement in instruction or education to make the students total partners in their learning.
Yeah.
And it makes...
And parents.
And
And their parents' name on it too.
Exactly. And so...
I mean, to me, I personally haven't been going to these meetings for like 12 years here in this
Right.
Seeing all the presentations is that parents are a big part of this and that they need to start seeing something that says, whoa,
Exactly, and I think we've been advocating with Performance Matters for the possibility of a parent portal, but I think that what you said about a student portal makes a lot of sense too, which is how can students track their progress? Because when you track the progress, you obviously know a little bit more. I mean, and it's weird, I've seen interesting movements where you've seen kids as young as like, it may have gone lower. I saw a class a couple of weeks ago, 6th grade, where the students owned their learning to the point where they had a folder and they had the standards and they had, hey, I got this one and I needed help on this one. And
well, this individual learning program, that's still philosophy that's in practice here, right? Or is that the one that's fallen off?
I think it's evolved a little bit. I think there are definitely elements of it that have found its way.
Where they choose, in a group of kids, what they're going to do today, and one of the kids teaches them. I'm not sure, because I lose track of which is the trainer this month, but my immediate thought was, if you're having them do anything where they are making decisions about what they learned today or something like that, then they also should be start being woven into monitoring the results, and then factor that into their decision about maybe how much homework I better read this week.
I agree, and I think that's something that like
reliability and control.
Yeah, and I think that's something we've advocated. So right now there's not a student portal in Performance Matters, but we did bring it up. One thing about Performance Matters, it was kind of nice to join the herd of districts that had done it, because like now we have a seat at the table of helping shape the product.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they give us the advantage of doing is about it's twice a year we go to a users group meeting, which is usually just up the road. It's like last one was in I want to say the last one was in Sumter County, so it was a 20-30 minute drive or something like that. They hold regional ones. There always seem to be one right around here. The part that was neat about it is that we get the chance to request like enhancements, and we get together we get the chance to conspire with other districts to go, this is a good feature. Student portal is something that has come up with them, and so I'd like to see that, because what I saw in that 6th grade class that I thought was incredibly powerful is that the kids, by owning their learning, not only knew where they were, but there was like it's kind of weird, I would think, if all of a sudden the score spits out at you at the end of the year, actually spits out at you during the summer, technically at the timing of testing, then
it's too late, they're already,
and as a student I don't feel real connected to any of that, like it doesn't make any sense, but if I'm owning it as it goes along, or I'm owning it after it happened, and I'm seeing it, then it does seem to mean more to me. So this may be a resource.
Having worked in the corporate world, I mean, you'd sit down and you'd have even weekly performance meetings, and they'd be looking at, production numbers or something like that. The individual managers would have to respond and talk about it, and in some cases it might be individual workers, knowledge workers, and their productivity, or a project and the status of it and something, as opposed to just waiting until the end of a quarter period and then say, oh, that's what I did. Well, now why did I not get better?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's an important part. And I think that's part of too, because these tests, even though they made, like we talked about the LSA and the FSA, they're assessing the same standards. Yeah. So theoretically, one of the things that would be nice is that as a teacher, what would be meaningful to me, because really what we're talking about is the assessment's the vehicle, but the standards are what we're watching, right? Mm-hmm. Is that it would be good for me as a teacher to see how that kid's developing during the year, and like you said, in these LSAs or even tests that I'm giving if I want, and then go, this is where I need to fix it. Like, this is where we can make some improvement. Or there's
especially if they can see how they're doing against their peer group. Maybe not individuals, but
that's true
the
too.
student. And, are you able to get a certain routine task done in 2 weeks like everybody else is doing? And this shows that you're not, and let's explore what we can do to change that.
Exactly. So I think that's actually a pretty key point. So one other thing that I was going to show you real fast is that so basically the difference between like a principal and
now we're in the teachers.
Right.
Screen.
So principals see this screen, and then they can drill down into any teacher they have. Teachers just see their students, and then like I said on the student detail, you have basically the screens that we talked about in play right now. Now standards I'll talk about in a second. The RTI, or the MTSS, the intervention things that the state is requiring us to do, they are being built here, but they're in the process of just being built out. We have a meeting next week to start, or not next week, the week after next, to start fleshing that out.
So if you have, like on an individual student, or even a class, like AP history or something, and the numbers are showing down, then is there a place where the teacher or the student enters in what their plan of action is to correct that?
So if the student were to enter intervention, like the intervention status, the answer is yes. So this is actually the screen, and the screen is really Spartan now because, again, the system is being developed out. But basically it's where they would add a plan, and there would be options and drop downs and strategies to address.
What, a month later, a quarter, or into the quarter? I mean, the best managers I ever saw were always monitoring stuff themselves on a weekly basis before the results came out in the computer system at the end of the month.
Right.
So that they would adjust that. And then this, though, provides you with the feedback instantaneously, so you don't have to do it manually. You've got it here.
So I think the efficiency that we're going to get out of this is that right now that plan process, that intervention process, is paper-driven.
Right.
And so what's happening is that paper is obviously more cumbersome to update, but it doesn't link to anything else. And a lot of times any process that's paper driven, it means that I have to engage multiple data sources to get the data to put on the paper, right? So what's going to be neat about this is that as this gets built out is that people who are like intervention specialists at the school who are monitoring, part of the problem that they may be experiencing is that the paper process is sort of like molasses a little bit, or like waiting around in molasses a little bit because it's so cumbersome.
Well, they get bogged down into, do I spend time counseling a kid or putting in data?
Correct. And especially data that, the slight tragedy in a process like that is that like, if attendance data is being kept somewhere, why do I have to go pull it and then write it in somewhere? Like, right? Yeah. And it's same with discipline and these other factors that we're looking at, grades and such. So when this plan comes in, the great thing about it is because we're shipping this data to the system, they're going to skip all that step as far as having to amass any of that. Mm-hmm. And then that analytic part is going to kick in to where I set a goal. I go, listen, maybe as a student I've been in trouble. I had 5 referrals last year, or 6 referrals the first semester or something like that. Our goal is to stay like at 3. Let's start small, right? I mean, that would be good, but sometimes you're working the issue. Sure. And so, not that should be what the goal should be, but I guess what I'm saying is reduce the number of referrals. Well, the good news is because the discipline data is being shipped here as an intervention specialist, I'm able to pull up the screen that will be here next year, and I'm able to go, well, we set a goal for 3, you hit 1, you did great, right? Or you hit 6, we've got some more work to do. But I'm going to be able to do that without having to pull it. So now, all this data amassing that needs to take place in the realms of attendance and discipline and grades is just now automatically going to be there. And so I do think that frees up these intervention specialists to be able to do more frequent monitoring. That's kind of to the point I was getting. Instead of having to, in cycles, spend eons of hours preparing the data so I can talk to the student or know where the student is or have to consult with them. 15 different people to get it. So I think that part is really going to provide us a little bit of a turbo boost next year when we implement that system.
Great. Let me check the camera to make sure it's running.
Oh yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, because I might want to borrow this. I might actually just put this on on the instructional technology Facebook.
We got 8 hours of battery life.
No, that might be good. I don't know.
In fact, we better see how look, we're at 9:52.
Well, whatever you got to, but
right.
But if it's okay with you, I'd like to show you a couple of other things, and then I'm going to try to get into a demo site so we can take a look.
Great.
So these are kind of sort of some of the at front analytics, but I want to show a couple of things that I think are a real big deal in terms of the report.
These are all different kinds of reports.
Correct.
And I'm assuming you can create other ones that you could add to this list?
Actually, these are kind of the modules to create the report. So within each one of these modules, you're basically given a directive set.
You create a tailored version.
All kinds of stuff. So the first report we're going to look at is baseball card report.
All right.
And so this is one of the ones that I showed off at the training, and I've been sitting still on one side.
There's this password, dot.
Controls lots of cool stuff. So this is the baseball card report. And so whenever I think of reports, like right now, just to give you kind of a basic orientation, I have a district level view, so I'm seeing all 44,000 students. This is true of charter schools, anybody who's enrolled in any of our systems at this particular point. So this is the district. And so right now that's a pretty wide set. Now going back to the permissions, if I'm a teacher, I just see my 103 kids or however many students I have during the day. If I'm a principal, I see my 900 or 1,000 kids or whatever are at my school. So again, right now we're seeing a wider view than the average person would. But what over here on the left, if you think about reports, it's always who and what. And so here's the who, here's the 44,000.
44,000 students.
Yep. And then
Superintendent Cornigate's got a tough job.
I know, because that is a lot of kids. Oh, one interesting thing about this, right now, Unify, the system, even though the archive site will take a snapshot of every student that had been enrolled in Lake County, right now we're looking at a transactional system, and what that means is those are currently enrolled students at this particular point, because the production system always sort of deals in the present, the here and now.
So if you had some students that transferred out or moved, they're not going to be factored into.
They're not going to be factored into this report at this particular point.
So theoretically, you could just encourage the bad students to transfer to Orange County. And,
it never works. So, we don't have any bad students. We just have students that we can help grow.
No, we don't do that.
All right. So, with that said, if this is the who, I'll show you some options to whittle the who down, but this is the what. So this is the what we're looking for, okay? And so what's very, very powerful is that...
These are things like state, local by subject, by
ACT,
strand,
SAT,
SAT scores, PSAT, AP,
grades.
all sorts of acronyms.
Yeah. So basically, I think that's a good point, is these are either assessments, grades, or potentially early warning indicators,
Okay.
or things that we might look at in the graduation report. So all these things are, it just depends.
So you look at any one of those and
And the neat thing about it is you can start weaving in like things in concert with each other, which
Yeah.
makes it a very, very powerful tool. So let me show you real quick how fast it is or how easy it is. So state, local by subject is where most of our state tests are associated.
and these are all classes like biology, reading,
Correct.
and so forth.
So right now, if I wanted to take a look at FSA ELA scores for last year, I would click on this folder. And it's kind of an old school, almost like Windows Explorer look, if you remember that, where it's
Yeah.
folders in a folder. And 17, 18, those are retakes right now. So I'm going to look at the last full year, which
These
is
are years,
Correct.
different years of scores.
And so I'm going to click here,
24,000 in that score.
at assessments.
Okay.
And so what I see is that obviously there's some grades that are not tested out, kindergarten, first and second grade, so on and so forth. But what I'll see is that real fast, I'll see basically scores for every student. Now it's coded pretty straightforward. The red is level 1, because the state, actually, these are actually state-defined
Okay.
levels. So what you see is you see the score here, but you also see the state-defined levels. So level 1 is red, level 2 is yellow, level 3, which is generally considered to be proficient-ish, for lack of a better term. That's where the student, I won't say pass-fail necessarily, but level 3, 4, and 5 is what you're looking for
So
students
the
to
higher colors there, blue, black, and white, are better?
They're level
Or-
3, 4, and 5, yes, sir. So,
Okay, white is a score, means
so
nothing.
white's an interesting thing too. White, you'll understand this from your days in data, is a null.
Okay.
So it's a non-score. So let's talk about that for a second, because maybe I don't really want that there. So if I click here, what will happen is that it'll put an X through it or a slash through it. And if I click apply swatching, in just 1 second, I got
Okay.
rid of every student that didn't take the test for
So
whatever
you can
reason.
exclude things that's cluttering up what you're trying to look at.
Yeah, and what's neat about that is that I can actually go in and compare previous year's scores. So if I put 15, 16 in here real quick, and then...
Comparable data.
Exactly.
Like it should be in budget.
No, they don't have when you ask that question, they don't have a budget
This
model
is
yet.
not finance, which is my separate issue. That we'll give them a couple weeks to add that.
It may take a little bit of time. But basically what you can do too that's neat is you can drag and drop. So for example, I got added this a little sloppy, so maybe I want to look at in chronological order, 15, 16, 16,
Yeah.
17. But here's what's neat about that is that I can go in and let's get rid of, actually I'm going to keep that one this time, the null set. But here's what I can do that's pretty powerful pretty quickly. What I can do is I can go, you know what, I want to hear my success stories, right?
Yeah.
I want to know all my kids that were level 1 or level 2 last year. So by clicking this, I'm basically saying, not these, because that's how it works.
Don't show.
Yeah, basically don't
Okay.
show. And I want to know all my kids that did that were level 1 and level 2 last year, but aren't a level 1 and level 2 this year. So these are the kids
Okay.
that improved, right?
Mhm.
So in existing or previous systems, that would have been taken in a spreadsheet, mash it out, like it would have been a lot of work. Here with a couple clicks, I hit apply swatching, and what I've done is I've gotten a list, I should get rid of the nulls on this one. And so what I did is I have all these kids right here real quick that were level 1s and level 2s, and that we saw success in, 1,834 students that went from level 1 to level 2 to level 3, 4, 5. So these are students that did what we were hoping to do. We helped move the needle with these students.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And then of course, very quickly, I can do the
You can
the
see the reverse who's falling behind.
Exactly.
Because if they fall behind, then they're going to get worse the next year, and you need to take some
Exactly.
help them.
Exactly. And these are slippery. The test is not exactly year to year. There's some definite years that feel like there's a little bit of a bump up to some extent from math to algebra especially. But this is a great tool for people to be able to get a hold of. And again, those reports would have taken a long time for people to
Sure.
dish out, and now...
And you'd have to have people who would have been willing to do that and then figure out and understand that information. But here, as that people start learning how to play with this data, then they're going to start learning how to interpret it
It's
and
been,
then act on it.
it's been beautiful because like one of the things that I think has made the product of the implementation a little bit transformational is like, it's weird. Like a lot of times when you put something in place, you hope to go into a school and see people using it. If I'm just being honest, like, however, in the
well, there have been cases maybe before you got here where they'd sit there in a budget hearing and the board would ask, well, you know, how many people are using this $34,000 software package?
Right.
And they had the numbers, and it was like maybe 12%.
Right.
And yet they were paying for all of these teachers, and so that now it's important to probably focus on getting teachers and helping them understand how and be comfortable with using this.
Exactly, and here's one of the reasons why we took the training. We could have done a train-the-trainer model and all that kind of stuff, but we took our staff and we pushed directly into the schools because I think it makes, like, we wanted to cement that bond with the product. And the good news is that, like, most of the time when we train teachers, like, there is actually, it's been fun work, honestly, because, like sometimes you're training people on a process that nobody wants to do.
Right.
But here, people are like, oh, wow, look what I can do. And I'm not saying every teacher doesn't love everything. Every human being doesn't love everything. But I guess what I'm saying is that generally in a role, like, people are like, this is a really, really good tool for me to be able to see this stuff quick. What is neat about this, too, is that I actually have the opportunity to do, like I said, ACT scores, SAT scores. I can bring in grades for previous years or those years. So I can actually say, if I would maybe actually even turn the camera off at this point, but like, I guess the thing I was going to say is that to me as a teacher, one of the things that I always wanted to know is I'm giving my grades, but I don't get the state assessment back until the summer sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So one thing that I always do as a teacher personally, sort of introspection is, like, if I had a kid, and it can work all different ways, but if I had a kid who made an A in my class, wasn't successful in an assessment, that would prompt reflection in me. Mm-hmm. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if I'm failing every kid, but they're all passing the state assessment, that might prompt reflection in me too. You know what I'm saying? So to be able to mash up grades on top of assessment data, on top of those early warning indicators. Mm-hmm. So again, like, if I want to know,
is there a report that would automatically correlate the two?
Well, here's the neat part: is I can do that for me. Now we can build that report that automatically does it. Okay. But if I want to sit there and go, you know what? Like, I want to see, and here's what I'm going to do real quick. I want to release this watching for a second, just to make a more effective report. And so I'm going to click these. And apply swatching, I'll be back up to 44,000 students. And I'm going to go, you know what? I want my level 1s and 2s for this year. Okay? I want to look at, they took it last year, but they're sitting in a class right now. And I'm going to go, let's see what, grab a roll. Click at me. So I want to see those, and I want to see the nulls because I don't know anything about them. So right now, if I want to see my level 1s and 2s, whoever they are, and I also want to go, you know what? Like, give me a list of students right now for year to date that have been absent more than 10%. Mm-hmm. What I can do is I can click on that. And so right now what that did real fast is that I have an incredibly powerful report that I did probably in 10 clicks, which is, who are my kids that are struggling with attendance, who are my level 1s and 2s? That's the kind of delineation that people can do with the data very quickly to go, well, you know what? Gosh, I don't know everything about teaching, but I do know that if they're here, they're going to learn more. Mm-hmm. And so let's talk about these students who are struggling and get them here. It just allows me to start targeting, I guess. Right. And not that that's always, the solution, but a one-size-fits-all solution where you're just throwing everything at everybody doesn't work. You may take a different strategy with these students. And what's neat about that is I can also start putting in and go, just out of curiosity, out of the students that are struggling with attendance, how many have been retained at this particular point?
It's retained here. So.
Correct. And so how many have got that retention flag? How many have got more than
retained versus what? What is retained?
Retained means like they've been held back a grade.
Okay.
So again, sometimes that's an indicator. Or I can go, you know what? How many of these students also have discipline issues in this particular case? Mm-hmm. So I can start getting the picture, of that. And again,
well, let's take it another step. Is let's suppose that the superintendent looks at this and then looks at a particular school that seems to have a worse record. Okay, and so then they can more easily show something like this, I would think, to the board and say, this is because we only got 2 counselors here and we need 4.
Sure, it can help.
And it substantiates maybe a budgeting decision.
It can.
As opposed to, well, we need 2. Well, why? Well, because we need 2.
Exactly. Right. Well,
and so I mean that's the kind of thing where for instance, you're running data on a manufacturing plant and you find that they're just less sophisticated because they've got older machines. Mm-hmm. And so they come in and they start showing you data like this, and I've seen that. And then they get the buy-off to go finance or get the equipment so they can get their productivity up, which more than pays for that. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I agree.
And so that's kind of thing. And it also means that they could use that data to show the board and say, look, we need you to get out there and talk to the state legislators or whatever to get the funding to be able to provide what I've just shown is a need.
Exactly, and I think you can.
And that to me is one of the things that's kind of been my observation is there's not been ever any real solid data to help justify decisions or actions
Sure.
like that.
And I think the good news is that like by providing this data tool, like I think it's got that. I mean, the good news is that it can kind of sort of shape the. I mean, data shapes the argument in every direction, right? Like it's like, I mean, from a budgeting standpoint, there may be something. From an instructional standpoint, it allows me to see, and I mean, and one thing that I have to be careful about is I am a big believer, like data is data and kids are kids, like right. So I think it allows me to. I don't ever want it to get lost like these are students, you know what I'm saying? But as a teacher, if I can get a hold of this report pretty quickly, and I'll show you how we can kind of do that, then I can go, you know what, this kid is really struggling, and let me mentor this. Let me help work with this student, because you know what, like I'm gonna tell you, like I have friends, everybody does, like everybody's not a great student at some point. They're
kinesthetic perhaps, and they'd rather be playing baseball than learning from a lecture or book.
The kids can come from challenging backgrounds at this point, but like if you can, if I can find out what's going on quickly, like, and I feel like too sometimes because this data has been siloed in our data systems,
right.
Then it means the processes have been siloed a little bit, and this can help break down those silos. One thing that I would like to show, there's one thing I'll show you that's a beta, so at the camera, if it fails, it's because we
let me just say, principals, superintendent, start getting the board, principals, drag the board members in and start showing them this once you get your data in there, to then start building the case.
Fair point, good ad.
I didn't say that.
I didn't, I'm neutral.
He's neutral.
I'm neutral. So, if I click here, share, one thing that's great about this is that, I'm going to shorten it, but if I copy this URL and send it out via email.
That's a website link up there. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So
for this report.
For this report, to build to spec. So what's really cool about that is that, like, when I send this, it's going to prompt. So, like, let's say I'm an administrator. I go, listen, I really want to look at the students that are level 1s and level 2s this year. Yeah. I want to look at their history a little bit. I want to look at what their attendance and their discipline is. Mm-hmm. I want everyone to kind of like home in on this. But as teachers, they don't have the time to build the reports, to be honest with you. And
sure.
Anytime you have hundreds of people building reports, there's a chance somebody misclicks and you get a different set of data.
Right.
So what happens is that when you send that out in an email, they click on that link, it forces them to log in to Performance Matters, and they see their students, mm-hmm. if they're a teacher, or I see the school if I'm a guidance counselor, mm-hmm. and I see it tailored directly to my permissions. And then when I go back to that link the next day, the kids that might have moved around, I see the current kids still. Yeah. And so it's always giving them the most current, not dead data. So when I got that kid in yesterday, that kid's there. And this is a good way. I can download it to Excel too, but in a way we've started to try to discourage that because when you download it in Excel, like I said, something happened, something changed. Maybe the kid retook all kinds of things. So that keeps it. Now this beta feature, I have no idea what it's going to do. Hold on a second real quick. Yeah,
scatter diagram.
It is a scatter diagram. What it does is that it basically compares 16, 17. This is super beta, and so I'm almost embarrassed to show it at this point. So I probably need.
But just to know that you're working on a visual representation of data, so that you can start seeing a regression line. Oh,
I know, right?
I knew there was a reason I took regression.
Exactly.
So I knew what the word meant.
But what's neat about it is that like the goal will be to expand on our analytics as the product grows, and provide that. And of course, will the teacher use that? Who knows? But it does give some options.
Okay,
but
slow down here for a minute because I want to just see we're state. It's local by subject scores, vertical measure.
So basically what they're doing is they're doing 15, 16 versus 16, 17, 15, 16 being on the vertical.
Okay.
This being on the horizontal.
Alright.
And then of course you can actually home in here and see what the outliers are.
Oh, jeez.
And of course, if we weren't hashing out the student's name, you would see the
Look
student.
at that. He just clicks on a button and he can pull up the data showing what
Yeah, it
that's
gets a little
telling
messy
you.
here. It's kind of a purple haze there. But really what you're looking for is those outliers, right? You're looking for
But you've got, what's this big one there? It's,
total of 3
Oh,
students.
okay.
It's letting you know that you've got 3 students that have, for whatever reason, got identical scores, which is a little bit of a fluke, but statistically it can
Alright,
happen.
because all of those are individuals and then some of the bigger, or maybe 2 students got the same
What's
score.
fascinating about this is as this product gets developed out, I can add a student filter, which I'll show you in a little bit, which is that I can just look at my ESE students with a couple of clicks, and now that scatter graph
Yeah,
will just be for the ESE students.
okay.
So probably really wondering what happened here. 302 to 30 probably means, well, actually 30, we'll take that one, that's 30 to 302, so that's actually a good outlier in this case. This outlier would probably be the one that we would be a little more potentially, no, it's not bad either. Oh no, that's actually a pretty decent regression there. But anyway, the idea would be, very quickly I was able to see my ESE set, my students with disabilities, so. But that's kind
Because
of
the state tracks progress of the schools by these different categories, right?
yeah, so like
So it's important to be able to comply and with state yardsticks.
I think that's one thing.
That's the way of putting it.
When No Child Left Behind was in full force,
Yeah.
they basically required us to report by subgroups, and so ESE was one of those subgroups. That loosened up a little bit with the waiver that took place that Governor Scott had applied for at one point. However, there is new legislation that is starting to ramp back up looking by subgroup. And then, of course, if you're the ESE department, not that you aren't interested in every student, but like in the ESE department, the strategies may be different. So maybe you want to look at your data set so you can adjust your strategies accordingly. So, there's a lot of possibility there. But that was the part, that was actually going to be the thing that I was going to show you that I think was actually one of the coolest things, which is add student filter. So we import a ton of demographic data in. And so we talked about the what, and so I kind of gave you a preview of the what and all the what we could pull in. But sometimes it's the who. Maybe I don't want to look at all students. And so by clicking on add student filter, what I could do is I could go in there and I could put male, female, whatever. Like if I just wanted to look at males or females, that's a little esoteric. But if I just wanted to look at my ESE students, I can click yes. And now the filter will allow me to look at just the ESE students, ELL students. Also, something else that's neat is that we can look at just one school. So if I'm a district level person, I can drill down to one school.
I think it's important to understand that when you see all these different things that he's talking about measuring, or that we saw earlier, there's maybe 15 or more tests, over here, that the school district has to track all that, and any movement to try and consolidate that would be real helpful, I think. And that's one of the amazing things that amazed me is that there's so much different things that they have to comply with, that this at least maybe helps them control it a little better, so that maybe it reduces the bureaucratic work to meet the different objectives.
Very true.
And they got all these contradictory objectives, which I think is probably a big problem for the school district.
It can be tough. I do hate to say this too. I do have we can pause. I have a call at 10:30.
Oh, do you?
But then I can bounce back if you want. It's a quick call to look at a piece of ADA accessibility software.
Okay, I have to be somewhere at 11:30 in Leesburg.
I think my call would take about 10 or 15 minutes, or I can try to run through. I'm not too far from being done.
Why don't we do that? Because I think that we've seen a big portion is just the ability to analyze different factors and the importance of the data. And there may be areas that it would be real interesting to see, but why don't you wrap it up with maybe some of the things. And my thought is in the corporate world, I would find that we could come up with a report with spreadsheets, because early on we had those, and that you could have too many things that people were trying to watch.
True.
And that they have something where they're going to come up with certain prioritized benchmarks that they're going to say these are the top 5 that teachers ought to be most focused on, and not so they don't get buried in the weeds of like 15 different categories and analyzing stuff that takes time away from those top 5.
I think that's one of the parts where, in one of the earlier parts I showed you, those shared reports that district folks are building out, because for a teacher it shouldn't be that, like, we like this because we are interested in this stuff.
I mean, you can go, oh wow!
I know, right? It's like
everything
grocery shopping. Like, what you'll see is that when those shared reports are built out, like the district leadership and school leadership will be able to direct that by creating a report, sharing it with the faculty, and then all they do is go click on the report. So then what you can do is
they have some standardized top ones, but then they have the option to go in if they want to analyze other stuff.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to like push whatever the district message or sort of have people lurch towards it. But I also think it's important for teachers to be able to quickly have curiosity to dig deeper, because teachers are ingenious folks who might come up with, look at this.
Yeah, they might come with another factor that applies, and then through discussions with the leadership, they add that to the mix.
Exactly.
But let me just say that I think it's important that you also don't have a situation, and I'm just speaking from my experience, because I've actually seen it where, you know, the top level comes up with a report and it doesn't always filter down, and so the principals or you've got these district managers that come up with a different version, and then they're watching different categories, and they need to be concurrent all the way up and down.
I think that's one of the reasons why the sharing reports and the link sharing is so important, is that you can spec the report out and make sure the data they're looking at is built to what you need it to be, what it needs to be looking at. I think something else too that Dr. Weiskopf said in the very early genesis of this was that, of course, because the data reporting is really robust, there were a lot of people who were trying to shoehorn data elements that really probably didn't belong in here, but they just wanted to keep track of it. And we've been pretty purposeful about keeping a little bit of a electric fence around it to make sure that it doesn't become so, I mean, it doesn't try to contain the entire universe of everything to where it becomes like I'm lost in it. This next report is pretty remarkable too. I will show you this as kind of maybe a wrap up. It looks a little bit the same in scoreboard. They kept with their, like I said, their sports analogies are pretty deep in performance matters, but but basically you'll see the same options here. So the familiar way it looks is kind of neat. But this is a great analytic tool for principals, in the fact that if I click on FSA ELA, I'll see the same options. The difference is I see a plus here. And so let's look at 16, 17. When I click on plus, what this will do is this will build very, very quickly a snapshot of the FSA ELA score, and we recognize this. This is level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what this does very quickly with students for the current year is this says, hey, this is the percentage of level 1s, level 2s, level 3s, level 4s, level 5s. So it's a quick visual analytic of, bam, this is where my kids are. What's really cool about this is that if I drill down for a second, it actually displays it by teacher. Now keeping in mind these are teachers, this is what they're facing now. So like, in this particular case, I might look at this teacher, and of course this teacher may be like an intensive reading teacher or something like that, but this teacher has a pretty heavy list this year. That 43% or 80% of their students are level 1. And that's good information to know, right? And if I click down here as the teacher, I can actually see my individual classes. And then if I click here, I can actually drill down and see the individual student scores. So what's neat about this is that this gives us the ability to take a look very, very quickly and then kind of drill down and go, okay, what are my level 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s? All right, well, let me look at my teachers. Which teachers,
So like if you have a younger, newer teacher, they don't really yet have the skills to know how to react to those. I assume they have a counselor or the principal or somebody who would sit down and could show them this and then talk about strategies.
Yeah, and what's great about this too in scheduling is that once we roll it forward for the next year, in the summer, what they can do is they can take a look and go, okay, these kids are going to be over here next year. But I can also level it out a little bit, right? Which is I can go, wow, like I have 2 standard English teachers, but this one got like 60% level 1s and this one got 10, I'm making up numbers, but you get what I'm saying? Well, let's level it out a little bit, right? Because unless that teacher is got strategies or had success in that particular environment, maybe that's a little bit too heavy lift for the senior. So you get the chance to sort of maybe potentially balance it out, because this view is available to teachers, and they can have those conversations with administration as well too. The last part I'll show you, which to me just blows my mind, if I click on this dot, 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 what I can do is I can add all subgroups. And so now what I can do, just that fast, is I can run a comparison. Males, I know.
Charts!
I mean, males, females, the different ethnicities, ESC students.
So you can tell me that our males really declining in ability to pass versus female.
I could say, I wish, I mean, again, if I was...
We won't show that. That's for another day.
That's for another day.
Yeah.
But what's neat about it is that like, just that quick, I'm able to get those metrics. And again, those metrics drill down all the way to the teacher. And we've actually put the regions in, so the regional directors have access to this too. So they can. So we've conformed the application to our setup. And with that said, this was implemented in roughly, this is the fastest one I did, honestly. This one was about 2.5 months. Normally it's about a 6 to 7 month implementation, but we don't feel like we rushed it. We just had such a great data team. Usually you spend the first couple months getting the data out, and because our data team was so at the ready. And people will still, now that the data is transparent, they go, hey, what about this? We're still nipping and tucking.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's kind of got out of beta right around December, early January. But for the most part, I think it's just great that people are able to see the data and take a look. I think it's been...
Now, what would you say if, let's say, a parent comes up and they say, well, all this focus on ELA and other things, my kid is not in that group, and that what's going to help them pass AP classes and so they can get into college that they want?
Yeah, so I think that's a good point. Now, on the instructional part, being the computer nerd, I kind of did this in the meeting. It's a nice dodge I get to make. I don't have to always necessarily talk about the strategy so much. But I do think that's one thing that's important to note is that we did bring in AP scores as well.
These are all AP classes.
Those are all AP scores, yeah, from previous years. So we've included all that too. And so what's interesting about it is that you can again sort of match the data up, because one of the, as a former AP teacher, one of the things that is kind of true is that sometimes being able to do good, I mean, in a way, one of the biggest gaps I've always found with AP students, this is just my personal experience, is that they have a hard time with the text. The text all of a sudden jumped up a few levels, you know what I'm saying, because it's a college text.
Oh, okay.
And so...
The textbook.
Right.
Okay.
So, you know what, I might be, not that it would disqualify a kid by any stretch, but I might be looking at past year's FSA scores, which deal with reading skills, as an early look.
Well, the downplayed reading, maybe up until 2 years ago, because that's my own opinion, Common Core downplayed it. And so, and then they've revamped emphasis on reading skills, and at least the last couple of years I've seen.
And to support Dr. Weiskopf and Diane, or Ms. Cornegie's, initiative of sort of that authentic literacy piece.
Right.
Like, this is kind of great information maybe for me as an AP teacher to know, whereas I can look at last year's FSA scores. Maybe this is your first AP class as a kid, right? And so what this gives me the ability to do is look at that and then work my strategies around that. Like if, most of the time those kids have pretty solid, but you do try to encourage kids to reach for that brass ring of an AP course, and so maybe you take them in the hope that you'll grow them to that.
Well, they added the ability for everybody to go into AP classes.
Correct.
And there are people that say that's dumbed down in the classes.
Well, I don't have any opinion on
The
that.
mix of students. I'm not asking you to.
But
we won't get into that.
But I think
the data is here to analyze
Right.
questions like that
exactly.
and have a better handle on it.
And our goal is always to make every student successful. So, like, maybe you can acknowledge and something else.
All right. So maybe we got to wrap up because you got to make your phone call.
I do. But like I said, the analytics in this thing are really insane. And again, I sort of showed you kind of a quick overview.
Well, I think that's the important thing is for parents or teachers to realize that the data is here now, that people who choose to make use of this, and I think that the administration will, certainly, they're going to have a much better handle on how they justify making decisions, whether it's allocating resources or
I think so.
asking the board for money or other things like that. I think that's great because, you know, stuff like this, not with the built-in charts, but we used to do this like 25 years ago in business, you know, when I was working in major corporations.
Well, here's the thing that is the gift a little bit. You want a few times to say it. The state requires us to keep a metric ton of data on our students anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that's
Yeah,
great.
so you already have
So
to
we are,
have the data.
but if we already have the data, why not
Use
make,
it.
why not make use of it? No, exactly. So.
Okay. So with that, I think we'll wrap up. Anything last you want to tell our vast audience of
I'm good.
probably 25 people? Okay. And I was looking forward to rolling this out, and we can watch the news and see.
I was gonna say, well, the one thing I will say is all those analytics are coming to local assessment. So I think what you will start to see is next year, teachers will be able to create tests and have some of the same analytic tools. That, should they choose to use it, there won't be any mandate by any stretch.
Okay.
But I do think it's important for us to provide that. And then, of course, for the local assessments, those will come in. And I think people will appreciate being able to find that data just as easily. So it'll be good.
Well, I think it's great.
It's
a wrap.
It's been a lot of fun.